Welcome to Definitely Maybe Agile, the podcast where Peter Maddison and Dave Sharrock discuss the complexities of adopting new ways of working at scale. Hello, Dave. How are you doing?
Peter, good to see you again. And we've got an interesting conversation today. I guess between the two of us, I've got three kids who've all gone through university and they're doing exciting things, but they've gone through that whole, how do you get that first job? How do you kind of get involved in organizations which are significantly impacted by AI? You've got kids on the way in that direction as well.
Yeah, mine are about to head there, and that leads into the conversation of should they, which is an interesting.
Is that driven by them? Are they coming to you saying, "Why should I be doing this?" Or is that
actually
something
no? But both of them are very much dead set. University is my direction. That's where I'm going. So they're all in on that as an idea. I'm the one sort of going.
Especially, well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because there's a lot of noise in the market. I mean, the data shows that interns and entry-level roles that many of the organizations you and I have both worked with over the years have been hugely influential in just making those first few years on the job market, helping people get a foothold, get familiar with the work that they're doing. Those numbers are definitely falling, right? People are struggling to get those starter jobs.
And there's a lot of reasons.
Yes.
All of the countries. So, and I don't necessarily want to go into, I mean, between pandemics, people being shut at home, being unable to build social networks, being social media undermining the sort of trust of each other, a whole bunch of things that have all happened and put us in a situation where we have probably one of the largest proportions of young people being out of work right at the moment. And so across most countries. So it's not just in one country, which is interesting in of itself. And AI is just making that even worse, perhaps. But so let's put all that to one side. And I think the conversation that I was thinking would be good to have would be one around especially around in the engineering space, like because I saw an interesting talk at one of the conferences I was at recently, and the lady there was Christine was making a very, very good case for why you as an organization should be hiring junior engineers.
So let's put context around that. One of the big kind of trends that we're seeing is that there's an understanding that as you introduce AI into that engineering space, the roles that are replaced, the most common things that are replaced, are the tasks that the junior engineers are typically picking up and taking care of. So from a very simple view of that world, that means as an organization, you don't want to bring in junior engineers, you want to bring in engineers with a few years of experience, because that's where matching up with the AI adoptions, technologies that are being used, that is where the value starts getting created in the organization. Did I get that right?
Yes, and for lots of different reasons. I mean, one part of it is if you are looking after a legacy system of record and you've got a team there and you've just had 3 or 4 of your engineers who all said, so I've been doing this for 45 years, I've had enough of it, I'm out of here. That's a lot of organizational knowledge just walked out the door. If you don't have new people coming in that you can bring up to speed and bring into that environment and who can start to unpack that tangled web of spaghetti, because yes, we can start to look at replacing it and modernizing it and stuff, but it's still going to be there for some time. If you don't have those people coming in and looking at it and thinking about how you're going to do that, then it can be difficult to do. And as we also both know that the cost benefit of making that change can sometimes mean that even though it is possible, and even though that cost benefit ratio has changed thanks to AI, it can still not be a particularly attractive thing to do. There's all of these other things which seem more important that the business wants delivering. And it's like, as an organization, we need to get this feature out the door. That's more important than doing that upgrade.
New stuff is always more exciting than kind of maintaining and improving existing.
So some of the points that Christine was making, which I think are very good. One of them was around, and I don't remember all of them, and I apologize for that. But one of the ones that stuck in my mind was the around, well, the new engineers come in, will ask interesting questions that haven't been asked recently before because they just don't know. They don't have the context. Everybody else who's there is all like, well, it's always been done that way because that's how we do it. Whereas your new junior engineers are going to come in and say, but couldn't we just like do it this way? And and sometimes they'll be right, and sometimes they'll be wrong. but they are going to challenge the status quo. They're going to challenge like what's there today. They're going to look at things from a different angle that may not have been seen before. Yeah. So I mean, that's one example of why it can be very valuable to have those junior engineers coming into the table.
I love the as you're describing that, I'm thinking of both the value of diversity, like just different experiences coming to the table, but also there's an element of the value of naivety, right? Of coming in and just having a different perspective and just saying, well, why on earth do we not do this in this way? That challenges some of the the sort of institutional thinking that may have, or the acceptance of the status quo of what might be there.
Yeah, and of course they'll find interesting ways to break things too, which can also be valuable.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I've read a great story about an organization that they had been struggling, as many organizations have struggled with, is the adoption of AI and building traction. So trying to get delivery teams, development teams actually using AI in their day-to-day work. And one of the catalysts for that, what they found was the interns and those new junior developers come in with a comfort level and an expertise and an expectation to use these AI tools and just in nearly everything that they looked at. And so what they found was teams that had junior developers or interns on the teams, actually the whole team leapt forward in terms of their adoption of these new ways of working. So to your point around the diversity and naivety and the questions that get asked also is a sort of new skill set that comes in with that fresh blood coming into the organization.
And one of the other pieces is that they're coming in, they're asking these questions, they're new to the organization. They probably cost you a little less too, but they are going to be the lifeblood of the organization eventually. I mean, this is the topic you see a lot plastered all over the news, which is, hey, well, we've got the senior engineers. Well, eventually you won't have the senior engineers because, and so the assumption is we're going to make the models good enough that they can run the entire system, and then no humans will need to watch it at all, and then we'll be golden, right? So,
well, I think there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts in that sort of conversation, right? There's a separate thing of sort of what would it be like? Desire to work and where that comes in. How do you bring people into your organization? Because if we're bringing people into the organization and saying, fill in a role for a short period of time and eventually we'll automate it and you're out on your ear, the motivation, the desire to learn, to progress, to turn up on and get involved and engaged with that organization is severely impacted. I mean, that really is not something that we're all jumping up and down and saying, okay, yeah, let me go and do that.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And the conceptual idea is as well that there's the other sort of societal piece of that everybody who's in the latest generation is a snowflake and is lazy. So, which is something that's been recurring for a long time.
I believe our generation may well have been accused of the same thing back in the day. They just didn't use the word snowflake.
Yes, yeah, we did get accused of being lazy. I certainly don't feel lazy.
Okay, but that's something that is partially every generation says that about the new generation coming in. I mean, that's a fact of life in many ways.
Yes, and they have been for centuries. And centuries. And I think the earliest recorded one, if I remember it correctly, was 750 BC, something like that.
Is that really somebody's written snowflake down in whatever?
Not snowflake, but this new generation of layabouts is going to be, I can't remember the exact quote, something like that. But it was very much saying that, yes, the younger generation coming in. And so it happens continuously.
Yeah.
So there is that sort of lifeblood, that thinking, the new way of looking at things, the learning, as you were saying, around helps all of the teams around them succeed, and because they start to look at things differently. That can be incredibly valuable. So there's definitely a story that to be told there as to why we should still be bringing junior engineers into the organization, not least because they will eventually become your senior engineers. So you need to have some kind of thought process around how I'm going to get there, unless your thought process is I'm never going to need them. One of the interesting questions at the conference to counter that was that, well, why don't I let somebody else hire them as junior engineers and wait until they're intermediate engineers, then I'll hire them.
And okay, I'm intrigued by. Before we dive into that particular rabbit hole, I think there is we started off talking about the fact that every generation thinks the next generation coming into the workforce is lacking in some way. Let me just describe that as lazy or whatever. They're not really on board with that. Well, it's a transformational change, right? If you're coming in from, education, whatever the background might be, there is going to be some sort of transition piece that has to happen there as we're going through. And we've all been through it, right? Anybody who's gone through that. But there's also the second bit of what you were just saying, which is, do we really need, other junior engineers giving us something valuable? And we've identified a number of different areas where they're valuable. There's value through the diversity and the sort of information and perspectives that they bring to the table. But there's also a huge amount of value in just building commitment and belonging to an organization. And I'm sure you've had this experience as well. Those first one or two steps in our career are often formative in terms of understanding how we view ourselves in the workforce and how we view the companies that we work with and the situations that we work with and so on. So I've certainly seen that very, very strongly, where people who have great experiences with those first few companies, where they're well cared for and they're mentored and they're supported, have really strong connection to those original companies that they worked with, really good work practices, and an expectation of, know how to contribute to an organization, and also somehow know what the expectations are coming back. There are other people who have poor experiences where that is not what they're, they don't enjoy that experience, and that gives them something that haunts them for a while.
Yeah. And it's valuable too, because somebody who has that, who sees that and knows what they want, isn't going to waste your time if this isn't the organization for them. So it will be out of there faster. Which is also something you should keep an eye on, because that might mean there's something wrong on your side. It's not just that they're snowflakes. It's that they may be looking for something that your organization is not giving them. If we were to bring this conversation together, what sort of 3 points would you want to pull out of this? Were there any particular nuggets out of that you think would be wonderful things for our listeners to take away?
So I really liked what you said, and you came up with a 750 BC example. But that perspective, we forget that. We as Agile coaches and organizational consultants will often talk about having a beginner's mind and getting back to what it feels like as a beginner. When we've become very, very experienced, we often forget that. I think that as a reminder, every generation views the generation coming in as being not ready, whatever the phrase is, lazy, whatever it might be. I think we just need to remember that is normal, and it's not some particular thing which is prevalent to where we are today. It's always been a perspective, a view.
And it comes in with every new generation.
Absolutely. And then maybe the second point is the externalities, right? So it's very easy to look at junior engineers and what they contribute to the product that's being built, the services that are being built. What we don't count in all of that is the shift in understanding that comes about through the naivety and the diverse perspectives, where they either bring in new technologies, new ways of thinking about things because that they've been exposed to it and it's sort of in their DNA as they come into the organization, or just through, asking questions that without really fully understanding what the consequence of that question is. That sort of naivety of asking those questions can be such a powerful influence on an organization.
Yep, I'd agree. I think it's the asking things. I like that piece, actually. That'd be my takeaway, that being in the team, and that teams who have that person asking those questions actually grow faster and come together faster, because they get to explore things that they hadn't necessarily thought about before. So I think that's a very good one. Okay, so they will wrap it up there for today. And as always, you can reach out to us at feedback@definitelymaybeagile.com. And don't forget to hit subscribe and tell all your friends to subscribe. And we will look forward to next time.
Excellent. Until next time.
You've been listening to Definitely Maybe Agile, the podcast where your hosts, Peter Maddison and David Sharrock, focus on the art and science of digital, agile, and DevOps at scale.